Hey everyone, my name's Kelvin and welcome back to another watercolor tutorial for Procreate. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to paint this really super simple cat illustration. And the technique that I'm covering here is a lot like the technique I used in the penguin video. So if you like this process, this sort of freehand process, it might be worth checking out the penguin tutorial. So I've got a paper texture already loaded into Procreate, and in this case I'm using the Himalaya paper texture, and that's because this project is going to be really simple, so I'm going to rely on the texture of the paper to sort of give this more character. And for the brushes, I'm just going to use the regular watercolor brush kit, and as usual I'll put links to everything I use in the description below. Now to start painting here, I'm not going to use a sketch. I'm just going to do this freehand, and I think it's a nice kind of thing to try once in a while, but if you want a sketch, I'll put a link where you can download the free sketch in the description. So I'm going to grab the abstract round brush in the regular watercolor brush kit, and then I'm going to choose a color for the cat. And I think I'll choose this kind of medium, kind of khaki color. Then at a pretty large size, I'll just kind of rough this out. And what I'm trying to imagine is basically the cat's head here, the body, the front legs, and then the tail sort of curving around. So I'm going to keep it simple and just do a few splotches like this. Then I'm going to select a darker version of that color. And just in this case, because I want this cat to have a particular pattern where the head is a little bit darker, also matching the tail, I'm just going to add some dark up at the top. And then also just down here, I'll roughly outline where I want the tail to be. And then maybe as a final touch, I'll select a much lighter version of that color and just go over the main body. And you can use any colors, any patterns, pretty much anything will work. Just got to keep in mind the contrast because the tail is going over the body. So if you want the tail to be the same color as the body, you're going to have to add some kind of shadow later on. So once I've got these colors laid down, I'm going to grab the water blender brush, and at a medium size, maybe 30-40%, I'm just going to carefully mix this around, and I'm going to try to introduce a lot of texture, but also I want to try to keep the structure where the head is darker. And also, I'm going to need to define the tail a little bit. But first, I'm going to do a technique here where I use this water blender to sort of pull in some of these lighter colors, just like that. And then to give it a slight kind of watercolor bloom effect, I'm going to go over it once again at a little bit of a smaller size. And just on the edges there, I'll just kind of squiggle it out like this. And that adds a really nice kind of subtle watercolor effect. Now to define the tail, first I'll just sort of blend it, maybe using the larger size there. And then I'm going to go back over it with the smaller size again. And watch what happens if I just kind of, for example, here's a light area. If I use the water blender, I can sort of pull that and wrap it around. And notice how I'm able to sort of define the edge of the tail. So I'm just going to continue around and do this same technique just over the whole tail. Then after that, I can fix this weird boundary there by going over it again at a larger size. And just being careful not to accidentally swipe the tail like that. Just want to focus on this edge here. And then where the tail meets the body, I will kind of intentionally fade that and make it kind of an ombre kind of fade. So there we go. I've got the blending done. And now I'm going to sort of outline the silhouette of the cat. And I'm just going to freehand that. But again, I will put a sketch in the description if you want to work off of that. But I'm going to grab the eraser brush and set that to the fine liner pen. Then at a pretty small size, maybe almost 10%, I'm just going to rough out the outline of this cat, just freehanding it. Just keep in mind that the head is really the only critical part. And of course, if you make a mistake, you can just undo it and try it again. I recommend doing it in segments like this. So I've got the ears, and then the head has this kind of double bump. And you know, with my various practice illustrations, I found that to be more critical, this kind of flat top of the head, but depending on your illustration style, of course, you might want to do this differently. But after that, I'll just sort of outline the rest of it here. There we go. So that's the basic shape. And now I need to get rid of all this extra watercolor on the edges. So I'm going to use my normal selection tool technique. So I'm going to select the automatic selection tool. Then I'm going to make a selection on the body of the cat and then adjust the threshold until it totally fills that out. There we go. Then I'll do copy and paste. It's going to cut out that selection and paste it on a layer above. So then I can just turn off the original one, and all I'm left with is the silhouette of the cat that I actually want. Next, I'm going to add the sort of suggestion of the front feet on the cat. And depending on your illustration style, you might not have to do this, but I'll show you how I like to do it. So I'll zoom in here, then I'm going to grab the selection tool, set it to freehand. So what I'm going to do is make a selection that just outlines that foot, circles back, and then obviously the other foot is getting covered. So I'll just cut it off like that. So one foot, and then the other foot, and then it's getting covered. Then I'll go to hue, saturation, and brightness and brighten that. And usually when you brighten it, it will get a little bit saturated, so I'll desaturate it a little bit. Deselect it. Then I'm going to grab the water blender, and pretty much this whole top area, I'll just sort of fade it and blend it away. Now once those legs are defined, I'm going to grab the eraser again, and I'm just going to erase the bottom of the cat to sort of include those just a little bit. Now after this, I can move on and do the face details, and I'm going to do those on another layer, so I'll make a new layer that's above everything. And I usually start with the eyes, so I'm going to grab pure white, and again I'm going to grab that fine liner pen brush, and I'll just make a line basically where I want the eyes to be. Now because this is on a separate layer, you can just grab the arrow tool, set it to freeform or uniform, and then reposition that. And I think I want the eyes about like that. And that's pretty centered enough. So then I'm going to go and grab the same fine liner pen again, zoom in, and then do the almond shapes for the eyes like this. Next, I'm going to grab a pretty dark color, not necessarily pure black. And at the same size that I did the eyes with, I'm going to add the eyeliner. So I'll start by pressing very, very lightly, then harder and harder, and then lighter and lighter, just to kind of give that tapering eyeliner effect. And I'll do the same thing to the other eye. Now at this point I can decide which way the cat is looking, and I like to do the irises or the pupils being about more than 50% of the total eye. So what I mean by that is if I want the cat to be looking sort of up and to the right, what I'll do is I'll make a shape like this, and then I'll fill that in. And you can see it's much more than half of the eye being filled. And I don't know why, but that really does have a nice effect. And I'll do the same thing to this eye over here. There we go, that's it for the eyes. If you want to, especially if you like the Iraville style that I've sort of discussed in previous videos, you might want to add the shadow underneath the eye. So I'm going to do that here. So open the layers panel, and I'll select the body of the cat. Then I'm going to grab the selection tool, set it to freehand, and I'll make these sort of half circle selections under the eyes, just like this. Then to darken those, of course, you can just go to hue, saturation, and brightness, and then just darken them. And just a little bit is enough. Then I'll go back to the layer with the eyes and continue with the face details. So now I can move on and do the nose. The face is pretty dark, so the nose should be pretty light. I think like that. Then fine liner pen again. I'll just quickly rough out the nose here. And it's looking a little bit hard to see, so I think I'll adjust it. So I'm going to grab the freehand selection tool, circle the nose, hue, saturation, and brightness, and then I can kind of adjust it, adjust the color a little bit until it stands off good enough. Now for the mouth details, that's really easy. Again, we're going to have the same kind of contrast issue, so let's give it a try and try dark color like this. I'll use the fine liner pen, and you might be tempted to do the mouth like this, but I found just for stylistic reasons, I really like the mouth when it goes like this. It's kind of droopy. And I think this is because these illustrations could look a little bit childish, but by giving them these sort of sour expressions, it has a nice contrast. So I think that's why this mouth style sort of looks better to me. Now it looks like it has pretty good contrast, but if it didn't, if in your case it was hard to see the mouth lines, you can do the same thing we did with the nose. You know, use the selection tool, select the mouth lines, and then sort of adjust it until it stands off enough, but looks good in this case. Next, I'm going to do the ears. So I'll choose another kind of medium light pink color, and using the fine liner pen, I'll just fill those in. And lastly here, I'm going to add the whiskers. So I'll select another pretty light color, same fine liner pen, but maybe slightly smaller than I've been using. And I'll just fill out those whiskers just like this. And because we have this sort of continuing contrast issue, which is common when you're doing freehand illustrations, I want to show you one more trick. So in order to get contrast on the whiskers, what I'm going to do is use the selection tool, set to freehand, and I'm just going to circle the areas where I don't have good contrast. There we go. So these areas are pretty much disappearing. I'll feather out that selection, maybe 10-11%. Then I'll go to hue, saturation, and brightness. And if I just lighten that part of the whisker, almost this interesting, almost like an illusion kind of happens, where you wouldn't realize that the whisker is changing colors, but you definitely see it better. So I think this is a really nice technique for freehand illustrations like this. And there we go. This one is so close to being done. I'm just going to make another layer and sort of manage the outline. And for the outline, I'll use a kind of darker color like that. Same fine liner pen, maybe even slightly smaller yet. And just along the edge of this, I'm going to do this kind of sort of almost a dashed outline, something like this. And this is specifically because the cat is sort of furry, so I'm doing the fuzzy outline, sort of like what I covered in the koala tutorial. So the outline is almost done. I just want to do a sort of special outline on the feet here. I'm just going to carefully outline them like this. And then for the toes, I'll just do 3 little lines like that. Now to adjust the outline, the strength of the outline, I'm going to set the outline layer to multiply, lower it to 0, and then slowly raise it back up just until it's visible enough to give us the contrast we need. There we go. I think that's good enough. And at this point, I can just merge everything together onto one layer. And maybe as a finishing touch here, I want to fix the front legs a little bit. So I'm going to grab the water blender and just one last time, because they ended up being a little bit too defined, I guess, I'll just sort of blur the top a little bit. And there we go. The grumpy cat is all done. And here's what it looks like when I print it out. So I know that doing freehand artwork can be a little bit intimidating. One of the techniques that I use is first I'll make a sketch, and then just by repetition, 2 or 3 times, I'll follow that sketch and make that illustration. And then maybe once I've sort of memorized it, I can freehand it. Now the advantage of freehanding artwork is it adds a certain level of spontaneity to it. And it definitely comes across in the final artwork. And depending on your style, it might be a really good look to try. And that's pretty much it. If you like this video, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to check out the penguin tutorial if you like this technique. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you in the next video.